the video camera. And great. My name is Jordy Izzard, and I am here today conducting an oral history interview at SAIS with Barclay Ward from the class of 1961, celebrating today 50 years having graduated from SAIS. And we're going to have a conversation and kind of go down memory lane. So today's date is April 14th, 2011. And thanks so much for being with us here today.
My pleasure.
Great. And we'll just kind of start with what originally brought you to SAIS?
Well, I was always interested in international affairs. When I went to college, I thought I would be a geologist and took 2 years of that. And actually did a little better in geology than in government, as Hamilton called it. But I realized I was really, really interested in international affairs. And between my sophomore and junior year, I spent a summer at a work camp in Upper Austria, for the most part digging dirt. But it just fixed my interest in international relations. So when I came back as a junior, I just knew that this is what I really, really wanted to do. And SAIS was the school that I somehow or other had picked out quite early as the one that I really, really wanted to be at. I think I was attracted to the practicality of SAIS, the fact that it was in Washington. And I came in, it was the only school I interviewed at, and I came down for my interview from Clinton, New York. And I think, if I remember correctly, I interviewed with Ellie Salem. And he actually sort of asked me questions, not about my studies and what I wanted to do, but he actually asked me substantive questions. It was a little bit like a quiz, frankly. For example, when did Napoleon invade Russia? Which luckily I knew about the 1812 overture, so I could answer that question. So it was a memorable interview, and I was just excited to be accepted at SAIS, and that's when I came.
Well, great, and we're happy to have you 50 years later.
Yes.
So let's go kind of back to when you were here at SAIS. Tell us a little bit about your memories.
Well, the school was very much smaller. It was in a declining building on Florida Avenue. The student body was many times smaller than it is now. Many of the faculty were adjuncts. There was actually a fairly small full-time permanent faculty at SAIS then. But a lot of the adjuncts added a great deal. I did Russian studies here, and my main teacher was Helmut Sonnenfeld, who was a rather tough and straightforward teacher. He had us write 2-page essays on topics that could be comfortably dealt with in maybe 8 pages, but he would accept only 2. And when I later went into academe and taught, I actually used the 2-page papers. And I find, although they were not popular at the time, that many students really appreciated it. Well, that all started with Helmut Sonnenfeld here at SAIS. We remember a lot of sort of informal things, I think we all do. For example, registration was a kind of quaint process. You didn't really sign anything. It was a chat with the dean and 2 senior faculty members. Emma Baker, the registrar, sat in a corner, and you would talk about what had happened the previous semester and what would you like to take, and you would say what you would like to take, and if Emma Baker didn't think you should take that, she would speak out, and then eventually the interview was over, and sometimes we would leave not really quite clear what we had actually signed up for, but Emma Baker would always set us straight. I think the students were a key factor. It was just wonderful to be with a lot of people who were so capable and interested in the same kinds of things and our discussions amongst ourselves were really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the strong people on the faculty. I remember the first day at SAIS, we had an orientation. I think it was over at the Quaker Meeting House.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul Leinbarger, who was one of the great figures at SAIS at the time, greeted us and pointed out that too many of us were straight out of college, and he was sorry we were there, because SAIS has always put a lot of emphasis on work experience. So we remember a lot of things. I think everybody has strong memories of such a small, and in those days perhaps somewhat peculiar institution. But being here in Washington was a wonderful thing. For example, the speakers who would come and talk to us because of connections with the faculty. Dean Acheson came every year, who was close to Paul Nitze, who was at the school at that time, and other speakers. Hans J. Morgenthau, great realist theorist, spoke at SAIS. So it was a wonderful and kind of enveloping experience. I worked at the library. Probably the only job I've had that I never actually applied for. But I was studying one day in the reading room, and some older student came and said, Mr. Schork wanted to see me. He was the librarian, and he said, I want you to work on the circulation desk. And so I did. And it's also the only job for which I received a 100% increase in salary the second year. I was raised from 50 cents an hour to $1.
Congratulations.
To work on the circulation desk at the library. And the library was a great place to work and study, and also, may I say, to meet people. And it was fun being on the circulation desk.
That's great. And I think you may have a story too about how you met your wife at SAIS.
I did meet my wife at SAIS. I met her on her first day. She had gone to Bologna Center, spent 2 years at the University of Munich, and then came for her second year, which was my second year. There had been a dormitory at SAIS at this old building, and they had closed it down our second year, but they sold the furniture. I got an apartment with 3 other SAIS students in a building across Connecticut Avenue that's now the Albanian Embassy. And I came down from Connecticut with a suitcase filled with pots and pans and dishes and things. And when I got to Union Station, I called my landlady, and she said, I can't let you in because I found out that you're students, and my son says I can't rent to students. It was the evening. I had to go somewhere, and I remembered that one other SAIS classmate lived nearby on S Street, and I went to see if I could stay overnight with him, and I could. But he said, I agreed to help 3 women move into an apartment house. They had bought furniture from the old dormitory, and that's how I met Joan, carrying in a desk into her apartment. So we spent the year as fellow students.
That's great.
And then we were married the year following SAIS.
And I also should say happy 49th anniversary today.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And why don't we talk, those are great memories of SAIS. Let's talk a little bit about your career, and tell us a little bit about how it started and how it progressed.
Well, I joined the Foreign Service. I took the written exam in my second year, and somehow passed the oral exam, and entered in September 61. Actually, September 11, 9/11. 61 was the beginning of the A100 course, as it was called. Joan also passed her oral exam. She came in January '62. In those days, antediluvian days, the Foreign Service required women officers who married to resign, with one small exception, that if they had a Washington assignment, they could complete the Washington assignment.
Mm-hmm.
I had in mind that Joan and I should get married. I hadn't actually discussed it with her yet, but I worked very hard to get a Washington assignment and encouraged her to do the same, and she did. She actually worked in the historical office for William Franklin, who had taught us European diplomatic history. So that enabled us to get married here in Washington, and at the same time she could at least complete or partially complete her one assignment here. I wanted to go to Eastern Europe. I did Soviet studies, Russian language when I was at SAIS. I wanted very much to go to Eastern Europe, Poland, Yugoslavia. I worked hard to try to get such an assignment, but I was told the junior officers were not sent to the Soviet bloc, as we called it in those days, on their first assignment abroad. And I was encouraged to apply to Western Europe, which I did. Mm-hmm. I applied to Helsinki, Berlin, and Vienna as the three easternmost cities in Western Europe. I got my assignment, Ottawa. I went back to my counselor to ask how that had happened. It turned out, in his view, that I almost got my first choice, because Canada was then dealt with in the European Bureau, and not only in the European Bureau, but in the very same office in the State Department that also included Scandinavia. So in his view, I came very close to getting my first choice. Lucky it wasn't Berlin, or that would have been a distant possibility. We went to Ottawa, 57 miles north of the New York border, closer to home than I'd ever been since I went away to college. And it was a wonderful assignment. First of all, to find out, which we realized after about 3 weeks in Ottawa, that Canadians have a completely different view of the world from those of us in the United States. They have a different view of Canada in the world. They have a different view of the relationship between themselves and the government. It was a very different country, and we enjoyed that assignment. It was a well-led embassy. I then had a year of Polish language training. I finally got my Eastern European assignment and went to Warsaw, where I was in the consular section 1 year and the economic section the second year. Mm-hmm. But during that assignment, I did something that turned out to be very interesting and maybe had a long shelf life for my career. The Social Security Administration required that when a certain amount of money was distributed abroad to beneficiaries, that there had to be a survey. Mm-hmm. It turned out that one part of the survey could not legally be conducted in Poland, and that was checking the records that Social Security Administration had with the originals. We finally worked out an arrangement where an embassy officer and a Social Security person and somebody from Polish Social Security would travel together in the sort of 3-person delegation, or delegacja, as we said in Polish. And for 5 weeks I traveled, I estimated something like 6,000 miles, 6 days a week, going into places that otherwise most embassy officers would not have had a chance to go to. Fast forward, many years later, doing a doctoral dissertation.
Now, were you there that whole time when you say fast forward?
Yes, I'm just fast forwarding right now.
Oh, okay, but you will come back.
To many years later, when I did a doctoral dissertation, I did it on Polish provinces, and that came from that experience of just seeing the countryside and villages and cities outside of Warsaw. So it stayed with me for a long time. Then we were back in the department for a couple of assignments, and I was feeling that I really, really wanted to teach. I really wanted to teach. And I realized that if I were going to do that and have a proper career, I would really have to do it, start it then, and not wait until I completed a Foreign Service career. So I took a leave of absence from the State Department, more practically known as leave without pay, and went out to Iowa City with my wife and then 2 children at the University of Iowa, and spent 3 years there working on my dissertation, and then took a position at the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, where I taught for 31 years. And then somewhere along the lines, something almost like a mistake happened. I was planning my first sabbatical in Warsaw. That would have been spring '82, but Poland was in upheaval throughout 1981. Soviets were bivouacking on the border. There was a lot of pressure on Poland. The Communist Party in Poland, the Polish United Workers' Party, was collapsing. Solidarity was rising. And I just sensed that this wasn't going to hold. A friend of mine from the Foreign Service, who was then Assistant Director of the Arms Control Agency, was giving a talk at Sewanee. And I said to him, you know, I don't think this is going to work. He said, well, you could come and work for me. And so instead of going to Warsaw, suddenly we went to Washington, and exactly 10 years after I'd left the State Department, I walked back in to the Arms Control Agency and working on nuclear nonproliferation. And they asked me to remain as a consultant, and I did. And from time to time I've gone back for a year or half a year. I'm actually working there right now. I did this morning. So one of the things that I've really treasured in my teaching career is to have one foot in academia and one foot in the government. And I think it's helped me both ways. It certainly has helped in the teaching. And I think the teaching broadly, because we teach a range of courses at a liberal arts college, have probably helped me in my work in nonproliferation as well. And one of the other great pleasures I've had from teaching and SAIS and my other career is to encourage a lot of my students to come to SAIS, and quite a few of them have done so.
And we appreciate that. That's terrific. And so in looking at government versus academia, is there one you'd say you appreciated or enjoyed more than the other, or do you think the combination of the two is really?
It was the combination. It was the combination. I was, until spring of '82, headed in a much more conventional academic direction of continuing to work on the topic that my dissertation was on. I had done some other work in Poland in the years after I went to Sewanee. Had a Foreign Foundation grant the first year, and did a project on public opinion for USIA, along with a number of other people working in Russia and Eastern Europe. So I was headed in that direction. But I've really treasured the workaday world that I find in the State Department, and that's helped to inform my teaching. And I very much have appreciated the teaching. I had a wonderful teaching experience. Sewanee is a wonderful place to teach. And one of the joys there is to get to know the students very well. There are fewer than 1,500 students at this college, a lot of super bright people. We know them well. Right now, when we come back to Washington, a lot of our time is spent seeing my former students who are now here. Some
That's
are my
great.
professional colleagues. And I think it's the combination. I think academia alone, looking back, might not have been quite as happy an experience as I thought it would be before I went out to the University of Iowa. And I think that the teaching and the chance to shuttle back and forth between these two careers has helped me here as well.
Mm-hmm. That's terrific. And is there any part in looking back at your career that you would consider kind of your favorite years or your favorite experience?
Well, I've had a lot of favorite years. Our 2 years in Ottawa were wonderful years in spite of my resistance to going. I've had some years here when I came back in 1990, for example, in 1994, 1995, working on the extension of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, that are just cherished. They're wonderful, wonderful years. And I've been very, very fortunate in both places to work with super people. And the people that I've worked with in the department are just so competent and so dedicated. They really care about their work. And the people that I've worked with at Sewanee really care about teaching, really care about the students. So I've had a very happy experience in both places.
That's super. So tell us, in thinking then about current students today, and in fact we had an open house for newly admitted students yesterday, and given your vast experiences in the world and in your career, what advice would you have for current students today as they embark in the beginnings of their career?
Are we thinking students who might actually be coming to SAIS or students in
Well,
general?
no, students in general, students at SAIS. So I was just saying that newly admitted students are about to start at SAIS, hopefully, and we've got current students here. What would you tell students who are going to graduate from SAIS? Any advice?
I think the most important thing is for the students to remain open-minded about values, about directions that they might take. There are only 2 years here at SAIS, and they go very, very quickly. So I think these 2 years at SAIS become 2 years of really intense exploration and self-exploration as well. And I think if students remain interested and open-minded about that experience, to get a breadth of courses here, which SAIS pretty much demands, I think that they are in good shape for whatever career comes afterwards. I think that one of the things I liked about SAIS was that we had so many different people on the faculty as well as quite different students. I think the worst thing any professional program in international relations could do would be to present a coherent program. Something where everything is all neat, fits together, and is packaged up. Because the international world is messy. It's complex. There are a lot of moving parts. They keep changing. It's a really messy place in some ways. And I think people have to be open-minded to figure out how it's working. And even though you think you figured it out last year, the chances are this year it's working quite differently. So what I would encourage graduate students to do, those at SAIS among other places, would be to be open-minded about the various things they're hearing, what they're thinking about, what they're likely to see, and do what they really, really want to do.
Well, that's terrific. And I thank you so much for your time today. And it was wonderful to hear your stories. And just congratulations on having graduated 50 years ago and on your 49th wedding anniversary.
Thank you both.
And we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks.